Ladies and gentlemen, we sincerely hope you found the plenary and breakout sessions today helpful and insightful. We have now come to the last panel of the forum, Final Thoughts, Partnership for the Future of Sustainable Growth. May we now invite Mr. Andrew Sheng again to the podium for the closing panel and introduce the rest of the discussants. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm right here. Okay. Dennis? That's good. Great, thank you. Well, we've really had a good discussion over the year of the horse, horses for the courses. Well, you know, last year, as we told you, we served you the appetizer, or pardon my bad French, hors d'oeuvre. This year, we've served you the main course, right? Victor will give you the dessert, but I'm going to give you the takeaway. You're supposed to take away everything, you know, that we can't finish this conference. Now, what is the key takeaway? I think we're really so grateful for all of you coming here. I cannot say more sort of sincerely, the quality of the Asian speakers has been fantastic. And you can see this time around, there was disagreements within Asian speakers, and everybody gave you straight talk, right? The perspectives was a straight talk. I include Stan as Asian because he's from Israel, right? And his advice I take to heart. If Asians going to have a proper dialogue with the rest of the world, we got to do proper research. And that we take to heart, and FGI will do our best. Second takeaway is that Asia cannot do it on its own. And exactly as Rami Kosh said, if Istanbul is the bridge between the East and the West, Europe and Asia, right? FGI will be the bridge, the platform for us to get that Asian global dialogue. I think that's, you know, absolutely so important. And I think, you know, this is an area where we've now come to a very, you know, very quick summary, because I said Victor will give that summary and I will ask my colleagues to do it, but before I introduce them, let me give you some quick intakes. Out of the 4 research projects on the global supply chain, you know, He Yafei asked the crucial question, is multilateralism dead? And Pascal has given us the vision that this is something that the WTO is so important to us that we need to take the long view, right? On finance, Ide-san put it very, very well, right? Is finance innovation, right? Or negative innovation? I mean, these are very important questions that we need to consider. On the governance issue, we all agree cities are the futures of Asia. That cities will be, you know, the areas of great growth. And finally, on sustainability, which had a lot of great discussions, and Mike and, you know, talked about this issue, we're talking about both social and ecological sustainability. But if we think about it, sustainability, what's the most sustainable? Within Asia, the one that has survived everything is basically the family. And so we've heard one thing very, very important on the discussion over the family businesses and social sustainability. Success is relative. The more success, the more relatives. You meant to laugh about this. And of course, you know, I think Marcus also said this very well. You know, the more relatives, the more difficult, not so easy to get success. You know, it's the contradictions that we need to think about. But bottom line, if we think through all the difficulties that we've had, Sam Palmisano said it very, very well, and the whole session on innovation, that it is through innovation and new thinking and technology that Asia will get out of its middle income trap and change, everybody. And so, innovation, if I sort of hear it correctly with pardon my, it's about perspiration, it's about inspiration, it's about passion, it's about competition, it's about cooperation, and it's about desperation. Right? Because if we don't, when we have that fear as edge, we innovate, we change. We need to deal with all the things that we deal with. Now, we can only deal with this if we are all partners. And that's what FGI wants, and that's why this panel is so important. We're to finish, and I want every one of my partners here, and I would wish all of you can be here, but we've done this, because if you can see, everyone here is part of the think tank. Now, what's a think tank? If you don't think, the tanks will come. I think some of you may have heard this. FGI is one where Victor does the thinking and I do the tanking. But never mind. Anyway, so I think I'm so grateful that we have networks. Our vision is that we need to have partnerships with everybody, and using this partnership, how do we take the ideas that you have given us, the questions that you've given us, and translate it into action? Because, words, vision will not get us anywhere. It's action. And so this action, I hope my colleagues here, and you can see this table will actually represent more than 80% of the world. Myself, I'm very proud Malaysian represent ASEAN. Dennis from Europe, Rohinton, although he's working in North Africa, comes from South Asia, Lu Mai from China, and Rob Johnson, last but not least, head of INET, will finish up the discussion. So let me start by inviting our European partner, the Kiel Institute, Dennis Snower, to say a few words.
Good. What I've taken away from this conference, which has been an excellent conference, and I congratulate you and your colleagues for organizing it. What I take away are two contradictory messages. On the one hand, the world has become very interconnected, not only in terms of trade and capital flows, but also in terms of policies. And I think Mike Spence got it absolutely right when he said that in Asia, policymakers seem to be a lot more proactive than in Europe or the United States. And if you look at the main policy issues, fiscal policy, monetary policy, financial market reform, and structural policy, there is a standstill in Europe and not much movement in the United States. And that is affecting Asia negatively. In fiscal policy, it's clear that European countries and the United States need some long-term fiscal plan that ensures that national debt doesn't rise much faster than GDP in the long run, that nevertheless enables fiscal policy to be used countercyclically in order to stabilize the economy. And little progress is made in that direction. In terms of financial market regulation, a lot has been said here about it. We haven't got there yet. We've done some stabilizing, but we haven't altered the incentives that cause the instability. And that is a global problem. In terms of structural policy, European countries, and probably a lot more, haven't really figured out where the big growth is to come from. And I have a nasty suspicion, and it's no more than a suspicion because we don't have enough data to check it out. But it's possible that our interpretation of growth since the Second World War is mistaken. The standard interpretation is that after the Second World War, there was a huge amount of destruction of physical capital, and then there was catch-up in the West that took us straight through to the mid-70s. And then there was a productivity slowdown for 20 years. And then the productivity slowdown ended with the internet and .com, etc. And there was much more rapid growth until the financial crisis. My nasty suspicion is that the story is simpler than that. That is that, yes, there was a lot of catch-up that the West did, just like right after the Second World War, much like China and other Asian countries have done over the past 25 years. And that catch-up basically came to an end in the mid-70s. And there wasn't, this slowdown didn't last 20 years. It's been with us throughout. And we've just masked it by low interest rates and higher levels of indebtedness. And what if we are living in a country, an environment in which advanced countries simply grow much more slowly than we could have imagined? How do we prepare for that type of world where simultaneously inequality is on the rise? Big, interesting problem that policymakers need to be aware of, and little is done in that regard. But the big problems that have been addressed here concerning growth and jobs and equality and so on, sustainability in a broad sense, these are all big challenges, and the policy instruments that we have not really adequately grappled with these challenges. But one thing has happened, and that I think is really impressive, and we miss it if we think too short term. But if we think what's happened in the past 10 years in terms of the division of labor between business and households and government, there's been a quantum shift in our understanding. The story of the division of labor used to be that households are here to maximize their utility, make themselves as well off as they can be. Business is here to maximize profits, and the government is here to set the framework so that there are few externalities and everybody's paying their own way and everything goes smoothly. And the financial crisis brought that consensus to an end. And what we have now, the voice of business has been very strong here, and business has taken over a lot more responsibility for the economy and for society. It won't do to simply say, well, I'm maximizing my profits, and if you've got a problem with that, turn to the government. We have had voices here from diverse parts of the world saying business has a responsibility to make growth sustainable. That's environmental sustainability, resource sustainability. Business has a responsibility with regard to intergenerational equity and even intra-generational equity, that is helping the poor and so on. The government sets the institutional and legal context, and there things have changed too. Education has been a big topic, and the sort of things we're hearing about education were basically unheard of 10 years ago, and that is education is meant to promote adaptability, it's meant to help diversity and openness, it's meant to promote equality of opportunity, create an environment for creativity. That is a conception of education from which many educational institutions are still very far away. And government has a responsibility for combating corruption and creating trust. These are all issues on which economists don't have so much to say. Trust is not a big subject in traditional economics. Corruption is also difficult to deal with. And these issues of who takes responsibility for what is it that motivates business to take responsibility for sustainability? That is an issue that economics has not grappled with. And then there's society that provides the cultural influences. You've mentioned the Asian respect for family. That is sort of one big constant. That is largely missing in many parts of the West. There's the culture of freedom of speech, where there's also a difference across geographic regions. And then there's this issue of confidence that people have that they're able to change the world. That is something that Ned Phelps's recent book has emphasized strongly. That type of culture has huge effect on economic activity, also something that economists have not dealt with. Now, the last thing I want to point out, where there's also been a sea change, is that these different areas, business and households and governments, are no longer seen as separate areas. They're seen as part of one holistic system. There's an interaction between government and business and society, and the question is, how do these three interact in some complementary or dysfunctional way in order to tackle problems of urbanization and health and education and employment and training and so on? Avoiding the middle income trap is a question of the interaction between these issues. This too is something which traditional economics has had rather little to say. And because the environment is changing so rapidly, also in terms of this division of responsibility, we deal with something unprecedented. And when it's unprecedented, then it hasn't been replicated, and then probability theory doesn't help us. And then we're in a world not of risk, but of uncertainty. And that too is something where economics needs to do a lot more to grapple. It's been silent on this issue. And there I think that think tanks such as ours can play a huge role in identifying the issues, in finding new equipment to deal with these issues, and then transporting the upshot of these thoughts to policymakers and making this a better world.
Thank you, Dennis. Rohinton?
Andrew, thank you. Actually, my main takeaway from this gathering is that the trick to have a successful gathering is to have these wonderful young people. You give them a very snazzy shirt that says crew at the back, and crew sounds so much better than staff or underpaid and overworked, and then they make the rest of us look good. And then I have a series of minor takeaways as well. The main one is that in this region, but in many parts of the world, we have not forgotten that face-to-face matters. There's no substitute for looking each other in the eye and mingling and exchanging ideas, and we cannot underestimate the importance of that. So thank you again for that. Second thought on ideas and power. I think both go together, and we can't be naive about that. I don't think good ideas carry the day on their own. Bretton Woods was full of very good ideas competing, and on how the international monetary system should be structured, how global trade should be organized. And I mean, I certainly wouldn't make the case that the best idea necessarily came out. There was power at play. If this was a gathering of political scientists, we'd be talking about nothing but power. And I think economists tend to be the other extreme. But, you know, countries aren't clinging on to their privilege at the bank and fund for reasons other than power. So, I mean, ideas are good, but they're necessary, but not a sufficient condition. And as a subject area, we need to understand that. The third thought I had listening to these 2 days is that spillover effects are increasing, not decreasing, in a range of areas, whether it's finance, health, technology, money. And capacities to analyze are increasing everywhere. Universities are better around the world. Think tanks are better around the world. And so there's room for networks of think tanks. And as think tanks, we're good at lecturing others, governments and business, on cooperation and value chains and so on. And I think we should start doing that. And you've made a start here, so thank you for that as well. One more thought on networks. I'm seeing a lot of lateral networks. When central bankers get together from far ends of the world, they have a lot in common. When businessmen get together from far ends of the world, they have a lot in common. It's less clear to me that they are as connected with the rest of their societies. And so you have networks of professionals around the world that are essentially replicating the problem you have in countries, which is hierarchy and disconnectedness. And I do think that as a group of think tanks, we have to think about that. That technocracy is one thing, but connecting with the dispossessed is just as important. And there are way more dispossessed still, despite all the success, than there are possessed. On that thought, I second what many people have said about the rise of the middle class. And this is not an economic issue only, it's a political and social issue as well. But managing the aspirations of middle classes is a completely different ballgame than dealing with poverty. And how you represent that overseas is also a different ballgame. And so I think there's a whole series of issues to be thought through on that one. I still get the sense that we're better at designing rules or analyzing crises than designing rules that prevent crisis. And so I think we have a lot to say and do beyond finance. And I come back to the questions of health and technology, where you design rules that not only prevent crisis, but then as a community, once crisis happens, as we were reminded yesterday, rules will be broken with impunity. And we have to understand those inflection points and understand what next. And so the whole QE, what after QE, lots of hand-wringing, but we don't have the analytical tools for when rules are broken quite that way. And my, I guess, final thought, back to the nice T-shirts, would be that we have to think about the next generation. Who will be staffing our think tanks 20, 50 years from now? My think tank in Canada, and I know Rob's and yours, we're associated with a school. I mean, we have a School of International Affairs next door. I think there's a range of things in curriculum development, in improving the quality of degrees so that they're both technically good, but they're also training people to live in a world in which agility is important. These are all things that we have to do, because if we don't, we won't have the brain power and the manpower many decades from now. So in the interest of self-interest, but also society's interest, I think think tanks should connect more with the younger generation and with the way universities operate. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Rohinton. Lumai?
Andrew, I should say first, congratulations for Fung Global Institution to run this excellent forum. And we learn a lot from each other, and we build up our the network. I should say in China, now is the best time for a think tank to give us suggestions to work on the policy issues. First, we discuss about this third plenary meeting and resolution. And we know how government, how President Xi Jinping draw this document. They call for the suggestions. And the suggestions come from a government think tank, like Development Research Center of State Council. But it's also come from university, from a CAS, from a non-profit organization. or NGO. Know the Professor Michael Spence, Edward Lim are involved in this process. The total suggestions, this come more than 1,000, 2,000 about those suggestions. And then is make this sixth item of the reform plan. And totally is more than 3,000 the decision on each area. So we now have a goal, clear goal, have a framework, have a timetable. So the government and especially the President Xi would like to listen the suggestions from think tank domestically and internationally. So himself try to promote think tank development in China. So I think this is a very good time for cooperation, for build up the network and join this process for China modernization, for China's reform, because all of us are stakeholders for this process through the trade, through the investment, through the many areas. CDRF, China Development Research Foundation, is a non-profit organization. We call this also a think tank. We would like to join these efforts to build a network with all of you, work together. We did something like exchange information. Every year we hold 2 video conferences to analyze the world economic situation. So joined by Goldman Sachs, many companies, chief economists, and the non-profit organization. We can do this. We can do the joint research project. Now currently we do the regional development. We do the rural well-being development. And we analyze public health reform, and we do the assessment for vocational training. This vocational training, I need to mention, every year now we have 7 million of college graduate students, but also we have 6 million of students graduate from this vocational training school. So totally it's 13 million of students graduate. It's a big pressure for the job market, but meanwhile, we see the quality of trainees or graduate young kids. We do the assessment for government because government give subsidy for the fee and also give them life allowance. The third one, we do the earlier child development. I suggest we can do this, especially in developing country, even in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is not a developing country, but there's a lot of migrants. So we can learn from United States about this home visiting, nutrition intervention, but also have our contribution on this. So all those areas, CDRF would like to work with your institute, but also with any others. We got financial support from many companies. We feel very appreciated. But also, we got a lot of input, talent input, including Professor Michael Spence. So we appreciate all this, and we would like to feedback to the society, but also to all of you.
Thank you, Lu Mai. Rob, you have the last word.
Well, Andrew, I remember in April at the INET conference where the Fung Global Institute and you were our partner, and walking off the stage together. And behind us was the banner, Asia Global Dialogue, December 5th and 6th. And now it's here. So I thought I would share with you some of my thoughts about what we've shared, what's been so inspiring these last couple of days, a little bit of commentary on the issues, but I'm more interested I guess what I would call in the art or the poetry of what we shared. The first element of poetry that I would cite was the presence of Marcus Wallenberg. When you think, as Stan Fisher talked about, the importance of the Fund Global Institute, I saw Mr. Wallenberg as a symbol of stewardship. I saw him as the answer to the question that was the title of the first session: can business and policy be in step? This is a man and this is a family that's been very, very much in step with the issues of sustainability, financial, social, and resource sustainability in Europe. And it's a tremendous symbolic example of what you aspire to achieve. In our first session, Mike Spence and Stuart Gulliver explored some issues, but what I culled from that, what I think is a very important policy issue. They said that China has to be a larger voice in the global financial architecture. And I think that China's financial architecture may be one of the most important policy challenges for the world, not just China, in the coming decade. I went to one of your parallel sessions on RMB liberalization, and as I've been watching and following the documents in recent weeks, I've envisioned this clash of the titans between the very strong party leadership of China and the international capital market. And I see this dilemma before us where do you need the markets to create the pressures for efficiency, or is it better not to undergo something like a shock treatment and develop and deepen the domestic capital markets before integrating with the international markets themselves? I would tend to vote for the internally developed markets and then the international integration. And I note that David Wu had a certain enthusiasm for markets, and I would like to raise a slight caution there. Not all markets are the same, and they're not all abstract. They're institutions. And Michael Sandel, the political philosopher at Harvard, has reminded us that markets are not inert. They can transform the nature of relations profoundly. Robert Shiller, the new Nobel Prize winner, is working with George Akerlof on a book called Fishing for Fools, where market structures can be quite predatory and not benign. So I would just say that markets are not a deity. They're a tool, and they should be used to align profitability with social good. Underpinning that, I'll refer to Stan Fisher, because I think he gave us hints in his opening address that financial theory is a bit in turmoil. He asked the question, why are financial markets so fragile? They're built on trust, which is fragile, and they're built on expectations of the future, which in my own words, expectations of an unknown and unknowable future, which implies that things are not anchored. Stan gave us a hint in language when he said, and we are reluctant to tell the whole truth about that. I think this is an area in our work among all of us, understanding the market, the financial markets in a realm of radical uncertainty where the future is not known, and the psychological ramifications is important all over the world, but also a reason for the Chinese to proceed cautiously, particularly in light of the damage we've seen since 2008. Another dimension of this question of uncertainty relates to central banks. I recently had breakfast with a finance minister who said to me, "What do you think of my job?" I said, "You have an impossible job. You're trying to control things you can't control. Isn't that daunting?" And he said, "Yeah, but it'd be even scarier if I openly admit that I'm not in control." So again, Stan, your warning that we're reluctant to tell the whole truth about the nature of the system is a bit daunting. And I ask, should we trust the confident, or should we have confidence in the confidence men of finance? Obviously, QE comes in for a great deal of tension, and we are all laboring with whether this is an anesthetic for healing a wounded patient, or in fact, it's an enabler of avoidance. And I think the fulcrum is drifting in that direction. On resource sustainability, I didn't hear quite such a pessimistic perspective as we often hear related to climate change and carbon emissions. There is a tendency among scientists to talk about cumulative carbon emissions and seeing shale gas as something that buys us time but is not transformative. Mike Spence talked in his opening talk about the need to raise the price of carbon, and I'm concerned that the advent of the use of shale gas, while cleaner for the years when it's in use, creates disincentives for the breakthrough technologies that may ultimately be necessary, and that nuclear technology is quite frightening, because if you have to build 400 or 500 plants, one of them goes wrong. You might be 15 years into the project and everything shuts down and you're back to square one. I think the most important element that's rising at this conference, and I hope next year continues to deepen, is the question of social sustainability. We talked a lot about innovation, and as you all know, Joseph Schumpeter talked about creative destruction. We talked a lot about the creative elements of innovation here, but not the destructive elements which impinge upon social sustainability. Questions of jobs and technology, radical uncertainty of shifting comparative advantage. There was a lot of advocacy for unbridled free trade on the grounds, and it was said in several sessions, because we can make everybody better off or no one worse off. But the fact is we don't do that. And this brings to light that governance and markets are intimately and seamlessly intertwined. We can't pretend we're making the adjustments when we're focused on social sustainability. And while free trade has the capacity to be extraordinary, I think I strongly agree with that, we aren't compensating the losers in practice. We heard today a question raised by a moderator: should innovation be curtailed? I didn't know I didn't sense that was the right question. I don't think innovation should be curtailed, but perhaps the implementation should reflect social considerations. And I heard a lot about education, which was viewed as what you might call an input to production, rather than a broader sense of education as creating a citizenry which is part of the process of governance. And you often hear people in the markets complaining about the incapacities of government to act as a partner and respond. Coming now to some of the more, I thought, thrilling and poetic elements, comes back to the notion of stewardship and ideas. Linda Yang, challenged Stan Fisher when he talked about the long-run value of ideas. And she brought up that Keynes had said, in the long run, we're all dead. Stan said, in the long run, we're not all dead, but we're each dead, which I thought was a fabulous innovation. But I was reminded of the song by Blood, Sweat, and Tears called When I Die. And when I die and when I'm gone, there'll be one child born to carry on, to carry on. So now we really have pitted, through Stan Fisher's insight, David Clayton Thomas against John Maynard Keynes, a combination I never imagined I would experience. So what do we learn from the younger generation, and what do we pass on? For my heart, the most poetic moments of this conference were delivered by a younger man, David Wu, who humbly and lyrically gave us a beautiful presentation of and a deep social awareness about finance, a moral awareness. And I watched all of your eyes. The room was spellbound. And there was a message to us that reminds me of the Beatles song, I'm looking through you. That young man delivered penetrating insights in a very short period of time. But my highlight reel reaches its peak in the response to that moment. And I thought perhaps perhaps the most artistic moment of my conference attending life. And that's when our own rock star, Stan Fisher, responded perfectly to David Wu's by choosing to honor his beautiful talk by yielding the floor and conserving more time for conversation. Stan, once again, you showed that you are the Mick Jagger of international economics. And I'm not saying that because 15 years ago you ran around this region and saying to everybody you can't always get what you want.
Yeah. No.
So I think as we look at the close of this conference and we strive together, there is a great yearning for that stewardship, for a notion of legitimate authority. I loved Sam's discussion yesterday about education and small projects, but I wanted to say we have to aspire to take this goodness to scale together so it becomes a way of life on this planet, not a virtuous project from this or that extraordinary individual. We are involved in a long revolution of values, and it's a time of great upheaval when many people are terrified. Recently, I've started to teach theology and economics at the Union Theological Seminary in New York. And I was recently discussing religion and economics with a friend who said to me, at the core, I think the religion is, part one, the universe must be, at some level beyond us, coherent, and we feel ourselves a part of it. In part two, we have in us a sense of the good, an ideal we can envision that is hard to achieve. Putting the two together is, in his sense, the task at the core of our lives, to connect our goodness with the integrity of the cosmos, and thereby with the power of that connection, we outwit fear and overcome chaos to achieve security and prosperity. It's hard to imagine that type of integration without some kind of mental picture. And economics is but one of the mind pictures we use to achieve that integration and coherence. But economics has often been accused of being hijacked by elites to become punishing rather than inclusive. And I think as we reimagine economics, we have a great deal of work to do to create a sustainable and coherent cosmopolis. Finally, at a deeper level, our search together for values and vision relates to courage. Courage is a Latin word. Cor means heart. Courage means to tell your story wholeheartedly. To encourage is to provide support to others' heart as they tell that story. To be encouraged is to receive support, to tell one's own story. Together, as eyewitnesses here, devoted to developing the ideas and the stories of a vision of a sustainable life on this planet, and as we strive to envision legitimate authority, I am encouraged. And I am here to contribute to encouraging you. I find that to cultivate ideas and to cultivate our collective courage is very nourishing. And it is a particularly hard road in this realm of social sustainability. To honor Victor Fung, I created a poem today, which is called Community. We came together, a course to chart, amidst the minds and youthful art, and yearned to learn right from the start, to meet the challenge with all our heart. 2 days and nights we did explore, invigorate, at times deplore, strive to see what lies in store, prosperity, security, so much more. The family Fung, you did provide a forum where we could reside and build together a rising tide of ideas nurtured as we take. Andrew, Michael, and the rest, the team prepared a thorough test to come and give our very best, creating thoughts, no moment's rest. Minds ablaze, Imagine fired, onward with the thoughts we sired. Grateful for all you have inspired. We'll adjourn now smiling, satisfied, and tired. So together we define to live. What we get is what we give. I sit in awe, so positive, admiring the gift you give. We're becoming a community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rob has closed with one word, passion. And that's what we've got all here. The passion to think, the passion to act. And so on that note, let me thank the whole panel for wonderful, contributions. And let me just finish with some personal thank yous, right? First of all, I think, this conference could not have been succeed without the sponsorship of HSBC, Lombard Odier, PwC, Goldman Sachs, Gerson Lehman Group, FWD, and Khazanah Nasional Berhad. I want to thank them all from the bottom of my heart, because without your sponsorship, we would not be sustainable. And I want to thank the other people who have contributed also to this. But I think I could not finish this, my part of it, because I think Victor will say more, without thanking the inspiring leadership of Michael Spence, our academic board, Nick Stern, Sumitra, who's here, Hao Li, who's here, Wu Jinglian, and of course, my leader, Liu Mingkang. And of course, our research team would comprise Xiao Geng, Patrick Lowe, Bill Overholt, and many of the young ones who have contributed so much to this. And a lot of this was led by our COO, Anna Bourgeois, Sarah Monks, Godfrey, who'd helped, Siwa, and all the team behind the scenes. But a very, very special thank you must go to Lynn and Esther, who has contributed completely behind the scenes, but made this a great success. And a special big thank you to Colleen and her team, who has made this a great. So let me thank you, all of you, for all of this. Colleen, where are you? She's been shy. There she is. There she is. Colleen, I think fabulous, fabulous work. Finally, of course, we must thank Four Seasons for making this so comfortable and so great for all of us. And that's my last thank you, is of course to all of you who have come so far and wide, who have come to become friends and partners in our journey together. So, but that final note we'll have to ask our founding chairman, Dr. Victor Fung. Thank you. We shall leave the stage and let Victor come. Thank you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now have a closing reception out in the foyer area, and Dr. Fung will be meeting you there in a moment. Thank you.